Hello again, everyone. We're here to talk about restoring trust in the ad tech marketplace, and we have an absolutely stellar group of panelists with me on stage who are going to talk not only about the ad tech underbelly, but also what changes are going to be happening this year, some of which have just happened, to make ad tech more transparent. And I'll do the introductions. We have Belinda Smith over there at the end, who is the Global Director of Media Activation at Electronic Arts. We have Michael Barrett, the CEO of Rubicon Project, Brian O'Kelly, the CEO of AppNexus, and Keith Eady, who is the new VP and GM of Adobe Advertising Cloud, which includes the video DSP formerly known as TubeMogul.
May she rest in peace.
So, Belinda, let's start with you, since all decisions ultimately, I think, come down to the marketer. What have you been focusing on recently to get the transparency that you need from your ad tech partners?
Yeah, this has been a really good year for contracts for us. And so actually, we've been in housing for a while. And as we continue to add to our tech stack and to the tools we use, I think this year has been, or last year, the focus was really heavy on owning all of our partner contracts, negotiating those correctly, having fees, mechanism, guarantees, really every imaginable detail written into that contract. I advocate a lot and talk a lot about marketers just being more interested in their media programs and wanting to roll up their sleeves and understand more about how things work. And so that's definitely a path that we've been on for everyone at EA, not just the media team, but definitely facilitated by my team.
And how do you figure out, how do you know what you don't know? I think that's always the challenge as a marketer. What have you done to address that?
Well, reading Ad Exchanger.
Thank you.
But we talked about this a little bit, Keith and I, on the prep call, which is as in-housing becomes more of a trend, we have more diversified talent on the brand side. And so a lot of how do you know what you don't know is really drawing on past experience. I myself have worked on the sell side at an SSP and kind of all around. And so you pick up things and you learn tips and tricks and you kind of know what to ask. I would say absent of having that experience or having that kind of talent within the brand, it really is a focus on, in layman's terms, in the most plain language possible, through a contractual way, detailing the exact value chain of the transaction that you're paying for, and kind of how fees are charged and assessed, and detailing it out in that way naturally leads to some points of clarification, I think.
Mm-hmm. And this is also a call out for marketers in the audience to hire people who have a background in ad tech.
Yep.
Sounds like.
That's helpful.
And so let's turn to Keith and Brian, you two. You just made an announcement this morning about your companies are going to be working together. So someone could put a marketer like Belinda could put $1 into Adobe Advertising Cloud and then figure out how much AppNexus paid the publisher. What kind of waves do you think this move might make this year?
Sure. I mean, maybe just stepping back to your point about the value chain. So last October, we worked with all our suppliers to ask them to disclose their buy-side fees through the Adobe Ad Cloud platform. So if you're using Adobe, you understand in our UI what that buy-side fee is. And then with AppNexus this morning, we went a step further to disclose transparently in the UI what the sell-side fee is of any publisher that is being represented or sold through the AppNexus exchange into the ad cloud. So I'll let Brian elaborate on what that entailed in terms of the publishers, but we're super excited about actually bringing numerical transparency to every hop in the value chain, because that is, one of the first steps to restoring trust in this whole programmatic ecosystem. So we're happy to take that leap with AppNexus, and we obviously will look to roll it out with our other partners too.
Yeah, I'll tell a story. I was at Davos a few years ago, and I was introduced to Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and he'd eaten a hamburger, and his chief strategy officer says, "Oh, this is Brian O'Kelly, from AppNexus. These are the guys that invented programmatic." And Jamie spits out his hamburger and says, "You're the guys that are stealing 50% of every dollar I spend." I was like, nice to meet you too. You know, it's not that bad, I promise. And you know, that led to some really interesting conversations with Kristen Limkow, who's his chief marketing officer, around what would it take to really help not just the CMO, but the CEO understand that dollars spent in digital aren't burned up by this complex ecosystem. And so I've sort of been on a quest since then to figure out how to help us understand is all the different participants, whether you're a publisher who's concerned that, you know, is 50 cents of the dollar that I should earn being taken by intermediaries, or the marketer who has these concerns, not just of the direct contracts you can negotiate, but you don't negotiate my contract with the publisher. What if I'm taking a huge amount of the transaction? Yeah. We all need to have confidence in where the money goes, and we also need to see that the total take rate from this industry drops from, you know, these reputed 50, 60% numbers down to something in the probably low single-digit range if we really want to run all $600, $700 billion of advertising. It's not realistic to see that kind of take rate for a technology industry at those levels. So I think we're taking a big step toward that. I think it's been great to see Adobe be a leader here. It's great to see marketers like Belinda require this from their partners. And I would just ask everyone not to stop at DSP fees. Let's go all the way to the bottom and prove to the C-suite that this is a high-value industry that's reputable and isn't making these dollars just disappear.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And Michael, Rubicon made a really big move at the end of last year to remove all of its buy-side fees, but it got a ton of heat before that for its variable fees, which would vary by impression. Do you think Rubicon deserved that kind of reaction?
Which reaction? The one where people applauded the decrease in fees? Or?
The one before that.
No, you know, I think Brian hits the nail on the head. I mean, I think it's been a maturation process for the industry, right? And, you know, let's go back. You know, Rubicon used to play almost exclusively in a waterfall scenario where inventory would trickle through in a waterfall to Rubicon, and oftentimes it was exclusive inventory, and the cost of transactions, the value of the inventory from a CPM standpoint, I suppose you could look back and say, oh, those types of fees are warranted. Fast forward to an industry that's only increasing in size and growth, and now with the advent of header bidding, you're talking about gobs more inventory, higher priced inventory, higher quality inventory. And so I think it's only natural that you re-examine pricing models at that point. We decided to take it from 24% down to 11%, and by doing so, eliminate all buy-side fees. So I think that it was appropriate to do, given the times, given the evolution of the industry, and I think that Brian's right. It's probably a stop at that point and a continuation. And so, a big focus on economy of scales, big focus on processing power and lowering processing costs, et cetera. But I think fees are extraordinarily important. But the other things that we really focus on this year as well was, you know, auction mechanics. And so that's another tax on the system. If folks are entering into an auction thinking it's operating one way, being told it's operating one way, and it's operating in an entirely different way, and it's more of a black box. And so we really ripped that apart too, and said, hey, this is the way we're going to go to market, and in the head will be a first price shop, and if you're not ready to handle that, Mr. DSP, we'll create a tool for you that can help bid shape in the final auction, so you're not overpaying constantly. So giving choice and transparency. You know, working with AppNexus in terms of, you know, open source. I think as this whole world moves to server, you can't get any more transparent than open source, right? And so I think that that's a huge push for us, a huge initiative as well. And then lastly, ad quality and content quality, right? And really leaning in early to ads.txt, you know, investing a whole lot in the ad quality team, content quality team at Rubicon, and you know, those seem to be the really hot buttons in 2017, and we kind of exit the year having checked a lot of those boxes and looking to continue to innovate in 18, but those were some of the big ask that we were getting from our buying and selling partners.
And you mentioned auction mechanics, and I think that matters for the marketer because you want to be at the best performing inventory. You don't want to be where someone's getting a rebate or just where someone decided to turn one partner off instead of the other. I know that's one area where AppNexus and Rubicon have been butting heads a little bit, and just in general, I think there's been a lot of talk about, is supply path optimization fair? Brian, do you want to address that point?
Well, I guess I'd say that I don't think marketers should need to know these details. I mean, they should be confident that they're getting the best bang for their buck, regardless of what partner or what piece of the ecosystem they touch. So, transparency really is the answer. If we shine light on how this works, we can answer questions like, why did this intermediary make so much money on this transaction? Or where did my money go? So Belinda, I think it's great if you want to know all of these details of every algorithm or every piece of it. It should be transparent if you want to dig into it.
Yeah.
What I really want to deliver is you don't have to worry about it. We've all made so much hay over the past decade of programmatic becoming mainstream about all the complexity. I'd like to be on a panel where no one uses a three-letter acronym, where we're talking about actual, you're laughing at me, but it's possible. We're talking about, how do we deliver real value for marketers, not defending practices we used to use. And so I do think that some of these things that Michael talked about are incredibly important, but they shouldn't be relevant. I don't worry when I go buy a stock if the marketplace is ripping me off. Maybe I should. Probably should. But that's the role the SEC has taken. There's a lot of practices that I'm pretty confident that the amount of risk for me is very, very small relative to my stock purchase. Let's make advertising work that way. Let's make digital a marketplace we can trust. And let's get past all of these details to really driving value for marketers and funding content.
I agree with Brian. Sorry, I'll let you jump in.
Belinda, I saw your expression when Brian said marketers shouldn't worry about this. And it was not a good expression.
We may be on the same page, so you go ahead.
Yeah, to be clear, it is not, I don't consider it my job. It's not my interest or passion point to hunt down every fee in the ad tech industry. And so that partially resonates with me in that, I don't have anyone on my staff. I don't have anyone at the agency that I manage looking to say, what are the buy-side fees going on here? Did you get rebates? What's happening with this piece of inventory? However, I do think that there's an element of trust that's missing now, and we have to start with trusting relationships. And from my perspective, that means that the partner that I am working with is able to answer every single question I have. And maybe I don't call them every day and ask 50 questions, but when we come together, there should be open transparency on my side and on their side as well. And I think starting from a relationship that's built in that trust, a contract that is really well detailed out what the expectations are for both sides. And I think that builds a strong partnership to when there are new things that are concerning or discovered, we're able to have that conversation. From a marketer standpoint, the way that I see it is I'm really interested in getting in front of my audience, and that's about it. I don't really care about the inner workings that much. And the way that I think is best to get in front of my audience is to have really good tech relationships, but also relationships with partners and content makers and providers and publications. And so I can say that we have a list of partners that are really, really important to us on the publisher side. And we have conversations all the time about what are we seeing on our end in the DSP and what are they seeing. And if there's a mismatch and my tech provider can't answer those questions or facilitate that conversation, then that's a real red flag. It's not necessarily that I'm looking through budgets and looking at fees. It's that I'm talking to everyone on every end. And if I can't reconcile what's going on, that's when I'm going to take my money out of the system.
I fully agree. I didn't mean to say you shouldn't need, I'm saying you shouldn't need to worry because you can trust the people you work with and that the standards are clear. If you say you don't take buy-side fees, you don't take buy-side fees.
Yep.
I think
our goal. We obviously want to abstract some complexity for you, or you will drive yourself crazy, and probably with our help. So our goal is to remove the BS around auction dynamics, et cetera. But for us, what's unacceptable is to not understand the auction dynamics that Michael and Rubicon are running and that Brian at AppNexus are running. And if we don't have insight and clarity into the way they're setting up their auctions such that we can bid appropriately for you, that's where we raise the red flag. But obviously, if we don't have partners that give us that transparency, we don't work with them.
Yeah, I think the trust deficit that you talked about is an overhang, and it'd be great, downstream to be able to get to a point where these things, you don't have to understand how NASDAQ trades a share, but, and we've had these flares before over the 10, 15-year span of programmatic, and it's kind of everyone just went back to business as usual. And it'd be absolutely horrible from a personal standpoint to kind of go through all these radical changes and then everything go back to business as usual, and the bad actors can continue to thrive, and every dollar that they take from the system goes away from trusted folks. But even worse, if it doesn't work out and they find out 70 cents was ripped from it, they'll never spend $1 in programmatic again, so it hurts everyone. So I think that just the continual pounding on the table of this radical transparency, however mundane auction mechanics are, it sheds a bright light, as you said, and you'd like to think that at the end of 2018, bad actors are eradicated, because it's impossible to survive in a place where there's a spotlight on every piece of the food chain. And then, if that's the case, I think you can move into more of a normalcy where you're not pulling your hair out on details like that.
Good prediction. And Keith, one thing that you've talked, sort of back up for a moment, as we've seen ad tech become more transparent, fees have also gone down, and I think, Michael, you're a great example of that. But Keith, you also mentioned to me that sometimes you guys come in with a higher sticker price than some of your competitors, and then they're making it all up with hidden fees, and that just puts you in a bad competitive position. Can you speak more to that point? And,
Sure.
And how do marketers figure out how much value they're actually getting and what's the right amount for you guys to charge?
Sure. So, Adobe is following the TubeMogul legacy, strictly operating on the buy side. So, only making money from our clients, brands and agencies. So, in terms of aligning interests, it's perfectly clear. What that means is the only way that we make money is through that transparent tech fee and other transparent fees that are a la carte for other services people might choose to use as they buy media through us. But we differ with some of our competitors that have buy side, exchange, and sell side. So there's multiple ways for those clients to make money, and they're rational actors, and they may use their buy side fee as a loss leader into certain clients. So we tend to be often the highest priced player in the marketplace from a DSP perspective, but we're playing the long game, right? We feel like if we're upfront and transparent about those fees, we're aligning our interests with the marketers, we're restoring trust in the marketplace, and ultimately we're going to have brands choose to work with us because they can trust us. And I think that it comes full circle back to what we're talking about, but we're happy to take that tack even if it means certain short-term pain.
Great. Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, I think something that we discuss less often is pressure from marketers in a lot of ways has put us in this situation sometimes. And when you look at a partnership only on a price level and you're negotiating down and putting pressure on fees, like there's only one way for that story to play out, right? All of us run businesses. We know how much staffing and overhead and everything costs. And people have to make a profit and a margin, and so if you squeeze that down on the front end, I don't think it should be that shocking that fees pop up in other places. Again, I think, as Michael was talking about, it really goes back to the relationship and being able to evaluate it on multiple points and not just what is the top line fee number that you're giving to me. We also run a lot of tests to make sure that we're investing in the right way. When we look at win rates, we look at unique reach, we look at quality of impressions, we use third-party verification. There are a lot of ways to triangulate on who's really delivering the best value. But I do think that a lot of the call from marketer side for just cheaper everything makes it completely unsustainable and drives us into like this place of obscured fees, I would say.
We're obviously, we've got procurement in the background, but we too often conflate the 1 point off the tech fee with outcome.
Yeah.
Right? And the marketer cares about the outcome. And when you think about the possibility or the feasibility of one platform being 5 or 10% better in terms of reaching an audience or delivering whatever metric outcome as possible, that 10% improvement becomes almost laughably comparable to the 1 point that the procurement is trying to pull off a given DSP or whatever other platform they're trying to work with. So there has been a bit of a race to the bottom on price that creates these unfortunate behaviors by some actors in the marketplace. And I think marketers are starting to understand that. And we see a lot of marketers weighing in saying, no, this is the platform we want to work with. Go negotiate, but this is who we're going with. And I'm willing to pay a little bit more because I believe their outcomes and the way they work is the partner I want to have.
Great point. So I've been so looking forward to asking this question as we shift to looking at what's going to happen in 2018. What dark corners still exist in the ad tech world, and what ones will get exposed this year? Who wants to go first?
Go down the line. It's like a shooting gallery.
Keith?
Rebates are still out there internationally. We've eradicated all of them. We had a couple as we went public, which we disclosed in our financials. They're just not something we're going to do going forward, but they're out there. That creates another competitive dynamic, which makes it a little bit challenging at times, but again, long game. And for us, the rebates are, the writing's on the wall around rebates, and I think in the US, that's generally played itself out, but internationally, they still exist. I think there's still BS in the bid stream, right? And that's the hardest thing for people to uncover unless they're digging through log files. And to your point, who's digging through log files from a marketer standpoint? So again,
Yes, in the bid stream meaning.
the thing you wrote about with QPS rebates,
Got it.
shading
Yes.
things up like that, and that's pretty difficult to uncover unless your DSP is flagging that for you. So again, trust the partner you work with. But I think those are the things. The unknown fraud. I mean, there's still a significant amount of money obviously flowing through this marketplace, and will only increase. And those actors always seem to be half a step ahead. But our friends at White Ops and IAS and others, clearly incented to take that on. But those are the things that I worry about in terms of being able to provide value to our marketing clients.
Mm-hmm. Brian?
I think the thing I worry most about right now is really mobile app fraud or mobile fraud in general. A lot of the techniques we use to figure out who's behaving poorly are tied to IP addresses and to dropping JavaScript into the browser to see what behaviors are happening. We can't do that with apps. And it's very easy, like everyone here who's on their cell phone bored by this panel is connecting probably to the same cell tower with your phone. And that cell tower means you all look the same from a ad tech fraud detection perspective. So if any of you want to make a bunch of money from fraud, get one of those little MiFi devices, connect your computer to that, and you've now obscured your IP address. It looks like it's in the US, and you could just spam, and it'd be really, really hard to turn off that IP because you'd shut down all impressions from this part of Manhattan on that carrier. So we see utility apps. There's a flashlight app that sends us 1 billion impressions a day. And I have a really hard time believing that there's 1 billion people a day or impressions worth of that flashlight app.
It's not even dark in most places.
Well, and I realize like my daughter, my 8-year-old, likes to use these little flashlight things because they'll do like different colors, but like she uses it for 3 minutes and the screen's facing away from her. So I don't know. It's just an example where I can't validate that, but I also don't have any smoking gun signal. We just don't have good technical signals to say that's fraud. So I worry that there's a lot of incentive, especially with Facebook changing newsfeed, for publishers to find new ways to generate traffic. And we've got to be hyper vigilant. The easiest way to do this would be for brands to buy from high quality content producers and not buy the mid to long tail of sites and apps that you just aren't familiar with or that don't pass a basic sniff test. But that would mean a much smaller whitelist of sites that people work with and apps. I think that'd be good for the internet. It'd be good for content producers. But it's very hard to convince brands that the next 10,000 sites and apps are worth turning off. It's 2 or 3% of reach. I think it's 80 to 90% of risk. And if we could move down to really the trusted partners, we might see CPMs rise, but it would be going to newspapers. It'd be going to really high quality gaming companies, not to flashlight app makers. And if any of you make your own flashlight apps, I apologize.
Sorry.
It might cost you a few bucks.
Michael?
So yeah, I mean, so you look for the next dark corner and expose it?
Yeah, or is there anything maybe to mix it up a bit, anything that some of the people you work with do that you wish they wouldn't do? Got an answer to that
Sure, payment terms. And, you know, I completely respect the marketer and the agency in the process, but you talk about ways that you can have hidden fees in the process. You know, you delay your day sale outstanding, your payment terms reach 100 days, right? And so transactions done, we owe our publishing partner money. We can't stretch that out to 100 days, but continually being pressed by agencies and our DSP partners because they're being pressed by their clients, the agencies, to extend payment terms and enjoy the float. And that's a huge hidden tax. I mean, when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars where you are taking it out on credit to pay one side of the equation when the transaction's been long done, approved, verified, all discrepancy, eliminated it, and it's just another 40 days added onto it. That to me is as painful a tax as we incur, and it's only getting worse. And I think that my ask is that that's something as we start to lower our rates and we become more transparent, that's something on the table as far as negotiations are concerned.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never been given 100 days to pay anything.
Well, your agency has it.
So yeah, I want to quickly second mobile fraud. And again, I will just say that's an area where I think marketers need to get much more interested. It really shocks me that it's 2018 and people still do the shit that they do on mobile. That people are still like, oh, I need more inventory. Let's turn on another network because surely they have like unique shit that my first 3 networks don't have. So that's weird, and I hope we fix it.
I can't believe you said that on stage.
Sorry.
I love it.
No, I mean network.
I was trying not to use 3-letter acronyms.
Thank you.
But I think my hope for what gets the light in the year ahead is really data. And that's a conversation that we probably have amongst ourselves, but I think on stage less. I think there's a very real conversation to be had about quality of data. We've had that with location, which is great, but that's like one type of data. I'm interested to have that on all types of data. I think GDPR, for those of us who are global, will force that conversation and force our hand a little bit. I also think it's data control and what kind of data are you selling me? Where did you get it from? Do you actually have terms with the originator and supplier of that data? Because many times the answer is no, and that's concerning. So I'm very happy that we're talking about fees, that we're talking about the value chain, and I think we are really long overdue to have that conversation in regards to data.
Great. And ad tech has often just been pitched as this industry that's murky and complex, and it's just a great place for fraud and lack of transparency to thrive. Is there anything that's changing in 2018 that will make it harder for fraudsters or shady entrepreneurs or anyone else to, plant their seed?
Consolidation helps, right? I mean, if you get to 10, 15, 20 major players that are 90% of the marketplace that do things like Brian and I did this morning, then you don't have these dark corners, but you have 5, 6, 7 mobile ad networks that people still choose to engage with, and they're not acting by the same rules. So I think consolidation has been slow, like it's obvious, but all software industries converge to 2 or 3 players in each silo, so I think that's going to help. And
will some of that consolidation happen from non-transparent players going out of business this year? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. Brian? Oh,
I don't think there's a going out of business. I think it's a fundamental change to how we operate as the industry matures. And I think marketers in housing, asking more questions, changing the way that contracts are worked. Every week, it feels like there's another little step toward a better industry, and it may seem like it's slow. But if you look at the change, I think you said this at dinner last night, Michael, that in the last 12 months, we've seen more change on more dimensions than we've seen in a number of years. I think that change is accelerating. And I think it's the questions being asked on panels like this by really smart folks at marketers, by publishers wanting their money. I look at like I'm not picking on you, but like when
Sure.
the Guardian says, hey, what's up? This is before your tenure. Like
24 seconds and
no, but please
and
respond
someone's
on the next
that in there.
someone's Guardian.
No, I don't mean that. I'm saying it's good that they're asking questions. And I think those questions make the industry better. And I don't want to get into the details of that. I just think that is why this is going to get better faster.
I would just double down on Belinda's first point. The collective education and dispersion of informed people into different practitioner roles. There's a network effect to that, and it is significant, and it means the questions being asked by brands and agencies are significantly better than they were 2 years ago. And again, I think that dynamic is also accelerating.
And then being resolute to act on it, right? And I think that we go through all these mechanisms to make it great, and you're like, wow, there must be no elasticity in this business because I haven't seen a change. So that means that folks are saying they want to see this, folks are saying do this, and then sometimes not backing it up by directing spend that way. And so I would just ask that everyone continue it. But if at some point no one's seeing any benefit from it, it's going to go back to the world of murky, and the black hats are going to win. And so the simple fact is you got to be resolute and really back up the changes, because they're not without a sacrifice being done by players in the industry.
Great. Well, we'll leave it there then. Thank you, everyone, for sharing everything going on in the ad tech underbelly and what's going to go on to change it.
Thank you.
Thanks.